Vengeful ghosts and curses. Throughout history, man has governed his life according to certain laws and principles. A consensus natural order evolved over the centuries. Those caught defying that order face the consequences of human justice. Sometimes, though, justice is not seen to be done. Criminals go unpunished. Murders remain unsolved. But do the undetected guilty parties really ever get away with it? Or do eerie, inexplicable forces intervene to restore the balance in matters of life and death? Murder by a dead woman. Courtroom curse of the vengeful midget. Police have never solved one of the most bizarre murders in criminal history, for the killer was a dead woman. The roots of the crime go back to the 1870s when Miss Ada Danforth and her little ward, Fanchon Moncaire, regularly cruised between France and New York. Miss Danforth explained that Fanchon was an orphan whose parents had died in a fire. On her 18th birthday, she'd inherit a fortune. Fanchon would curtsy adorably to any inquiring passenger and skip away with her doll. But back in their stateroom, the child masquerade ended. Fanchon's cherubic face would twist into a mask of evil. She'd play her guardian with the gutter language acquired from 43 years of hard living from her early days as a circus midget to her present career as a thief and a smuggler. In spite of the quarrels, the partnership was successful. While Ada attended to the baggage, little Fanchon, whose real name was Estelle Ridley, would dance through custom barriers, still cradling her cherished doll, and no one ever dreamed of stopping her. Afterwards, the pair would take a cab to New York's Chinatown, where Wing To, an elderly friend, waited to receive him. In a back room, the head of the doll was unscrewed and a fortune in gems spilled out, the harvest of several months' larceny on the continent. The business might have gone on for years, but for one thing, Fanchon entered into a deadly feud with a beautiful rival, Magda Hamilton. According to police records, both women were vying for the affections of Dartney Crawley, a high-stakes gambler. Magda violated all the underworld taboos by going to the police as an informer, and the partners in crime found a reception committee waiting for them when they next docked in New York. For the first time ever, little Fanchon's doll was inspected, and minutes later, the pair were en route to the notorious Tombs prison. The midget, who had an impressive criminal record, was sentenced to life imprisonment. Ada, 10 years younger, was jailed as an accessory for 20 years. It was Fanchon who provided the most dramatic moment of the trial. When she saw the gloating Magda sitting in the packed courtroom, the midget sprang to her feet and made a shrill vow that she would one day kill her betrayer. Triumphantly, Magda married Dartney Crawley. He deserted her 6 months later to try his luck in California mining ventures. But the divorce settlement was generous, and Magda was very comfortably off. Her prosperity grew through shrewd investments, and she became a prominent figure in New York cafe societies. Fanchon was all but forgotten by everyone, but Magda Hamilton. One morning she burst into the police headquarters and viciously cursed the officers for not letting her know that Fanchon had escaped. She had awakened from a heavy sleep, she said, to find the midget in her bedroom. Fanchon still wore her childish finery and clutched a big china doll, but she was now a bent and withered hag, grinning with toothless gums. Magda screamed and fled into the bathroom, where she locked the door and cowered for the rest of the night. The hysterical Magda now insisted on adequate police protection until the monster was recaptured. A bemused police sergeant produced a week-old copy of the New York Sun. He pointed to a short item on the back page reporting that Fanchon Moncure had hanged herself in her cell. That afternoon, Magda Hamilton booked passage for Europe on a Cunard liner. Since the ship was to leave the next day, she had a farewell dinner with a friend and then went home. The next day, servants found her trunks neatly packed, but there'd be no ocean voyage for Magda. The woman was sprawled half naked on her bed. Her eyes protruded, and there's congealed blood at the corners of her mouth. According to the medical examiner, she literally drowned in her own blood. The membrane of her throat was ruptured as if some heavy object had been rammed into it with savage force. The murder weapon was never found, but there was a clue of sorts. Logged in Magda's bloody mouth were several hairs, similar to those found on the head of the child's China doll. Princess of Death. Egyptologist Douglas Murray neither liked nor trusted the disheveled American who sought him out in Cairo in 1910. The man had a furtive manner and appeared to be in the final stages of disease. But Murray, a refined Briton, could not resist the blandishments of his disreputable visitor, for the American was offering him the most priceless find of his career. It was the mummy, case of a high princess in the temple of Amun-Ra, who was supposed to have lived in Thebes in 1600 BC. The outside of the case bore the image of the princess, exquisitely worked in enamel and gold. The case was in an excellent state of preservation. An avid collector, Murray couldn't resist. Drew a check on the Bank of England and took immediate steps to have the mummy case shipped to his London home. The check was never cashed. The American died that evening. Murray learned from another Egyptologist in Cairo why the price had been so reasonable. The princess from Amun-Ra had held high office in the powerful cult of the dead, which had turned the fertile valley of the Nile into a place only of death. Inscribed on the walls of her death chamber, she had left a legacy of misfortune and terror for anybody who despoiled her resting place. Murray scoffed at the superstition until 3 days later. That's when he went on a shooting expedition up the Nile, and the gun he was carrying exploded mysteriously in his hand. After weeks of agony in the hospital, his arm had to be amputated above the elbow. On the return voyage to England, 2 of Murray's friends died from unknown causes. 2 Egyptian servants who had handled the mummy case also died within a year. Back in London, Murray found that the mummy case had arrived. When he looked at it, the carved face of the princess seemed to come alive with a stare that chilled the blood. Although he had made up his mind to get rid of it, a woman friend convinced him that he should give it to her. Within weeks, the woman's mother died. Her lover deserted her, and she was stricken with an undiagnosed wasting disease. When she instructed her lawyer to make her will, he insisted on returning the mummy case to Douglas Murray. By now a broken wreck of a man, Murray wanted no part of it. He presented it to the British Museum, but even in that cold and scientific institution, the mummy case was to become notorious. A photographer who took pictures of it immediately dropped dead. An Egyptologist in charge of the exhibit was also found dead in his bed. Disturbed by the newspaper stories, the board of the museum met in secret. There was a unanimous vote to ship the mummy case to a New York museum, which agreed to accept the gift provided it was handled without publicity and sent by the safest possible means. The case must be shipped by the prestigious new vessel making her maiden voyage from Southampton to New York that month. All arrangements were successfully completed, but the mummy case never reached New York. It was in the cargo hold of the unsinkable Titanic when she carried 1,498 people to their doom on April 15th, 1912. Thanks for sitting around and humoring an old fox and his tales. If you'd like more, please hit like and subscribe. And remember, nothing is more frightening than a fear you cannot name.